Richard Hawk Morrison shuffled through San Diego International Airport with everything he owned in a worn backpack. His flight to Phoenix was boarding, a one-way ticket bought with money from 3 weeks of day labor. He was going to stay with his sister, one last attempt to get his life together after 2 years on the streets. His clothes were clean but threadbare, his hair longer than military regulation, his face showing the exhaustion of a man who had fought too many battles. As he approached the gate, a businessman in first class looked at him with barely concealed disgust, pulling his bag closer as Hawk passed. Hawk took his seat in the last row, next to the bathroom, and closed his eyes. He didn't notice the two men in casual clothes boarding late, both with the posture and haircuts that screamed military. They were F-35 pilots heading back to Luke Air Force Base after a classified briefing. As they settled into their seats near the front, one of them pulled out his phone to check messages. He glanced back toward the rear of the plane and froze. He grabbed his partner's arm. "Dave, is that Hawk Morrison?" Dave looked back, squinting. "No way. Hawk's been Mia for years. Besides, that guy looks—" He trailed off, but they both saw it. The way he sat, the subtle scan of exits, the controlled breathing. Something was familiar. What these pilots didn't know was that Hawk was a legend in Air Force circles. Keep watching, because when they confirm his identity, this entire flight is about to change. The first pilot, Captain Mike Torres, stood up and walked toward the back. His heart pounded as he got closer. When he reached Hawk's row, he knelt down in the aisle. "Excuse me, sir. Were you Air Force?" Hawk opened his eyes slowly, tired. "Long time ago." Mike's voice dropped. "What was your call sign?" Hawk hesitated, then whispered, "Hawk." Mike's eyes widened. He keyed his phone and pulled up an old photo, a grainy image from a ceremony 12 years ago. He showed it to Hawk. "Is this you?" Hawk stared at the photo of himself in dress blues, younger, receiving the Air Force Cross. He nodded slowly. "That was another life." Mike stood and walked quickly back to his partner, whispering urgently. Dave's face went pale. They both approached the flight attendant, speaking quietly but intensely. Within minutes, the flight attendant made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to make a seat adjustment before departure. We're asking for volunteers to switch seats with a passenger in the rear." The businessman from first class scoffed. "I paid for first class, I'm not moving." The flight attendant's voice was firm. "Sir, this is not a request. We have a decorated combat veteran in the back of this plane who deserves better. Have you ever seen privilege get checked by real heroism? Hit that like button and comment about a moment that reminded you what respect really means. Subscribe because these stories matter." Mike Torres walked to the intercom and picked it up, his voice carrying through the cabin. "Everyone, my name is Captain Mike Torres, United States Air Force. The man sitting in the back of this plane is Colonel Richard Morrison. Call sign Hawk. He flew 127 combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. He saved my squadron when we were taking ground fire in Helmand Province. He talked us through an emergency landing that saved 4 lives. He was awarded the Air Force Cross for flying into a hot zone to extract wounded soldiers when everyone else said it was impossible. He's a hero." The plane went completely silent. Mike continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what brought Colonel Morrison to this point in his life, but I know he deserves our respect and our help." The businessman stood up immediately, his face red with shame. "He can have my seat." Others began volunteering their first-class seats. Hawk sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Mike walked back and extended his hand. "Sir, please. Let us honor you the way you deserve." Hawk's voice cracked. "I'm not that man anymore. I lost everything. I've been living on the streets." Mike's grip tightened. "You're still Hawk. You're still the man who saved lives. Come on, Colonel. Let's get you home." Hawk stood on shaking legs and walked toward first class. As he passed rows, people stood and applauded. Some saluted. Others just nodded with respect. When the plane landed in Phoenix, Mike and Dave had already made calls. A representative from the VA was waiting at the gate with emergency housing assistance. Mike gave Hawk his personal number. "Colonel, I'm not letting you disappear again. You're getting help. Real help." Within days, Hawk was in veteran housing with specialized PTSD treatment. Mike visited him regularly, and soon other pilots Hawk had mentored began reaching out. 6 months later, Hawk was working as a civilian instructor at Luke Air Force Base, teaching young pilots the skills that had made him legendary. If this story touched you, Share it with someone who supports veterans or someone who needs to understand that heroes can fall and need us to lift them back up. Drop a comment about how this affected you. Subscribe because we share stories of redemption and recognition. Thank you for watching and for understanding that the homeless veteran in the last seat might be the most decorated person on the plane. They earned our respect. Let's make sure they receive it.